If you think you could never be vegan, you're in the right place. If you think there's something big you'd really like to do, but it's probably too late, you're in the right place. My name is Michelle Olander, and I think there has never been a more important time to move in a vegan direction. So I'm here every single week to cheer you on and offer you actionable tips and strategies as you veg your best. Episode 143, The Vegan Rabbi, Akiva Gersh. Hi, my Veg Your Besties. Hi, welcome back. Happy last Tuesday in May 2023. Can you believe that? I am back at Veg Your Best Central. Okay, real brief. I want to get this episode put together today. Friday, the Friday before Memorial Day, long weekend here in the U.S. And apparently Charlie has plans this weekend. And if you don't know, Charlie is my virtuosic editor, sound guy, music composer, and the therapist who talks me off the edge when I have tech issues. So Charlie has plans, and he's not really that interested in waiting for this episode until Sunday morning. So if you follow Veg Your Best over on Instagram, you may know that my husband and I just got back from a great trip. Just the two of us this time, no grandkids, no kids. Just the two of us to the UK, and we'll talk about that at some point here because it really was jam-packed. Edinburgh, then train to Lindisfarne, then train to London. And speaking of trains, did you know that the doors on trains, British trains at least, the doors on trains are not like elevator doors. Train doors do not pop back open when they close on you. Did you know that? You didn't know? You didn't know that they just keep smushing you until someone finds and presses the open door button? Well, don't feel bad. I didn't know that either. And I do know that now. And I'm reminded by some bruised or maybe cracked ribs every time I take a deep breath, laugh, or roll over in bed. So don't say I never warned you. Anyway, I digress because this week we have a super guest, a great guest I discovered recently on Instagram, and it was because of a listener. And I love it when my listeners, I love it when you reach out. I learn from you. Even if you don't learn anything from me, I learn so much from you. And a podcast listener reached out and told me that she was vegan and Jewish, but she was getting feedback from the men in her community that they would not be on board with the idea of raising children vegan. Now, I'm not Jewish, so I could obviously not offer any specific cultural insights, but I do think, and I did offer, that this, I think, is a common issue in many, many communities. But anyway, the wheels in the brain were churning. The reticular activating system of my brain, my neurons, they're firing subconsciously. And somehow I must have put out into the universe with my brain, what could I offer? What could I find to be of some help to this young woman? And mostly to help her see her choice to be vegan was going to be a plus or an asset for her rather than something that was going to be limiting her chances of creating a beautiful marriage and family. So anyway, almost immediately, I discover the vegan rabbi, Akiva Gersh. Akiva Gersh teaches in, so many, really a variety of different formats about the connection between Judaism and the environment, animal welfare, and specifically veganism. Akiva holds a bachelor's degree in religious studies from Brown University, an MA, a master's in Jewish education from Yeshiva University, and a rabbinic ordination from Yeshivat Sulam Yaakov in Jerusalem. And Rabbi Akiva Gersh filled a need in his community by creating the first ever Jewish dating site specifically for vegan and vegetarian singles, which has turned into his very high-profile work as a dating coach on the Netflix show Jewish Matchmaking with Eliza Ben Shalom. I know. How did that happen? No matter your marital state, your religious identification, your connection with vegetarianism, I think you will be fascinated today by Rabbi Akiva Gersh. And I'm going to see you on the other side. Akiva Gersh, a.k.a. the Vegan Rabbi. Welcome to Veg Your Best.
Thanks so much. Really, really great to be here, Michelle.
Well, I appreciate you making time in your evening. You are talking to me from Israel, where you have moved over the last part of your life. And I'd love to hear about all sorts of your journeys, but we are talking largely about the fact that you are the vegan rabbi and you put together education for Jews to see where their spiritual tradition is in keeping with veganism, especially in our time now. So I'm going to ask you to give us a little background on who you are and where you came from. And I know you became vegan before you became a rabbi. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. So please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, great. So, yes, I'm known as the vegan rabbi, but before I was vegan and before I was rabbi and before I even became religious, I grew up in a suburb of New York City. I did not grow up in a religious family, didn't live a religious life. I was Jewish. I knew I was Jewish, but the Jewish part of my life was, kind of a light cultural Jewish connection. I went to public school, which meant that I went to Hebrew school a few times a week, which unfortunately, like most kids I knew back then, didn't really do very much for me to inspire me about my Jewish heritage or connection or identity. And by the time I got to high school, I was rather disinterested in anything Jewish. That feeling only strengthened in college. And I found myself very, very removed and disconnected and non-identifying with the Jewish part of me. But when I first got into college, although this actually started in high school, I started to get really involved with activism. Lightly in high school and much more seriously involved with the activist world in college, starting right away my first year. And after my first year of college, after leaving the suburban bubble that I grew up in, where you don't really understand the world out there or how you impact it, or how modern humans impact the great big world. So that first year, I had a lot of epiphanies, a lot of realizations, a lot of eye-opening moments about my life, the world, how I grew up. And the main thing I took from that first year in college was that we humans are really destroying the world, destroying the planet, harming the environment, hurting the animals through our everyday, seemingly innocent actions. And that was a very, very strong and important and I would even say intense realization to have. And by the end of that year, I decided that what I did in college, I wanted it to be connected to somehow, hopefully doing my part, however big or small, in helping to heal the world. So I became an environmental studies major by the end of that first year, and then I became a vegetarian by the end of the first year. And if you knew how I ate as a kid, those first 18 years of my life, me being a vegetarian was one of the most radical and revolutionary things I could have ever done in my life. I grew up not eating any vegetables. Healthy food was not a thing in my life. I ate lots of meat, lots of dairy, lots of junk, lots of sweets, lots of processed foods. So for me, going vegetarian, it was a complete overhaul of my life. And then, and so I had to relearn how to eat, basically. I literally didn't know the vegetable kingdom, and I had to relearn how to eat. And I had help, from friends who were already there. And then about a year later, I decided, wow, all the reasons I went vegetarian are probably the reasons I should go vegan also. Because if I care about how the animals are being treated in these industries, well, the same thing, unfortunately, if not worse, is happening in the dairy and egg industries. And so I did. When I was 19 years old, I became vegan. And around the same time, interestingly enough, I started to become more aware of spirituality, interested in spirituality, desiring spirituality in my life. And that really kind of launched me on a few-year journey of exploring spirituality in general at first. And then I came in touch with and contact with, in connection with Jewish spirituality, which I never knew existed. Nobody ever told me. I never thought it existed. But in addition to becoming more aware of Jewish spirituality, I became aware also of Jewish teachings that have to do with environmental stewardship and caring for the environment and protecting the environment, not just as a nice value, but as an obligation, and caring about animals and animal welfare. And these were a whole slew of teachings that I was becoming, again, aware of, that I never heard about growing up. And it gave me a whole new perspective on Judaism, which really motivated me to explore Judaism more, and really in the first way of my life, in the first serious way of my life. And as I explored more and more, I found more of what, one, I was looking for spiritually, and two, well, what I found very, very inspiring, again, when it came to the environment and to animal welfare. So that's a whole nother very, very long story, but that very, very long story, really, really short, that eventually inspired me to go to Israel a year after college. And there is where I deepened my spiritual connection Jewishly. I discovered a city I really connected to called Tzfat. I sat down and started learning Torah for the first time in a place called the Yeshiva. And lo and behold, about 6 months later, I went back to America, and I was an Orthodox Jew, which nobody ever expected me to do in my life. I didn't expect me to do in my life, but there I was. I was an Orthodox Jew. I was still vegan, of course. And what I found, which was so interesting, every time I went to a Shabbat table, and back then, being newly religious and not yet married, I was often a guest at people's tables who, I didn't know them, they didn't know me, so they weren't ready for a vegan to be at their table. And most of these people never met a religious vegan. And they were kind of stupefied by it. They were always very nice and respectful, but they were like, really, literally, I mean, time after time after time, the whole Shabbat conversation was centered on how I ate. And this can go on for 2 or 3 hours. And I welcomed the questions, and it even kind of helped me to train almost to like be able to answer these questions. But basically, I'll just kind of sum up by saying that as I learned more about Judaism, and as I learned more Torah as the years went on, my reasons for being vegan, my Jewish-backed reasons, my Jewish-supported reasons for being vegan only became stronger and stronger. And I felt that, and I found that the ancient Jewish tradition, with all of its incredible and diverse laws and values, really, really supports going vegan in our world today.
Now, I'm a little bit surprised to hear that people found you the first religious vegan, Jewish religious vegan in the Shabbats that you were invited to, because in my personal anecdotal experience, the first vegetarians I met were African Americans, not middle class white girls in the suburbs, and the first vegans I met were observant Jews. Young women, I think they were all women, actually a couple men, who just found it simpler to observe the dietary laws just because as young people in small apartments, they just thought, it's much easier to observe it by being vegan, and then stuck with that sort of thing. So, but I think they were observant, but maybe not traditionally religious. So they may have been kind of a hybrid sort of practicing Jew that in all communities we have wide varieties of how people practice. So did you find that people were skeptical that this was actually Jewish tradition to be vegan, that was supported by Jewish tradition?
Yes, absolutely. And the world that I found myself in right away when I went to yeshiva in Israel, and then came back to America, because the community that I lived in America, in New York, a place called Monsey, New York, is an ultra-Orthodox community, as was the community that I was first learning in Israel. So I went from this very, very, secular Jewish lifestyle to living amongst very, either mainstream Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox Jews. So for them, this was really an anomaly that they'd never really seen that before. Because as you're alluding to, for them, eating meat is a Jewish tradition. It's what you do. It's what you do on Shabbat. It's what you do on the holidays. It's how we experience the joy and the pleasure of these holy days. It's how we celebrate. And here, I am sitting at the Shabbat table passing up all of the meat dishes, and they have to quickly, and again, they're always so sweet. They're like running around. What can I give you? What can I make for you? I didn't know. I'm so sorry. I'm like, don't worry. I'm fine. There's so many salads on the table. I'm going to eat that. There's rice. There's potatoes. I'm fine. I never worried that I wouldn't have enough to eat. But they were always very, very kind to make sure that I did. But they were very, very curious. And again, these conversations would go on for a very long time because they never heard about it. They never heard about it from the rabbis. They never saw it in books. They never heard people talking about it. They don't know people in their community who do this. And then here I'm coming in, to the world, even for that just one Shabbat meal, and challenging that, not like in an out of way, just really because of the way that I live. And they were so curious, a little bit dumbfounded. Everyone had their own little different reaction, but sometimes they would bring up sources for me, like, what about this and what about that? And that's where kind of the training began. And after years and years of that, I really kind of learned how to respond to these classic responses to how I eat, these arguments, trying to, prove me wrong. I feel like I've developed really good answers and really good counter arguments over the years. And yeah, I mean, basically in Judaism, it's not an obligation to eat meat today. It used to be the only time in Jewish history it was ever an obligation to eat meat is when there was a temple called the Beit HaMikdash, the temple in Jerusalem, one temple where there were sacrifices offered. This was the last 2,000 years ago. It was destroyed by the Romans, that second temple. And without a temple, there's no sacrifices, and without sacrifices, there's no obligation to ever eat meat. And even the obligation to eat meat back then was so minimal. The amount that someone had to eat over the course of a year, literally today, your average meat eater probably eats that much meat in a few days. Right? So we're never talking about this obligation to, consume. You just don't find that in Judaism from an obligation kind of level.
So when you talk about having maybe not arguments, but able to offset what people are saying about what's traditional, what is part of our value, what is part of our heritage. In most, I think, cultures, we have what's actually taught as part of our value system. And we also then just have what mom did and what grandmother did and how grandfather handled things. And so that kind of gets, I guess you would say, distilled into one tract. And if you are somebody who identifies as maybe traditional or orthodox in the small o form of being somebody who's trying to do things in a way that honors our traditions, honors our heritage, our culture, it's probably hard to tease apart those threads of what's traditional and what's actually a law or a teaching of our culture.
100%. I mean, Judaism has been around for over 3,000 years. So in addition to our set in stone laws, we have customs. We have many, many customs. And customs are very important in Judaism as they are in other cultures and traditions as well. And at times, customs almost reach the level of law and obligation. But it's important to remember that customs are not laws. Customs are customs, even if we've been doing them for thousands of years, sometimes for hundreds of years. And specifically, we can't forget that a custom can never override a law. So to fulfill a custom, we can't break a Torah Jewish law. And today, with what's happening in the factory farming world, in the meat and dairy and egg industries, with the untold and horrible suffering that these animals are forced to endure, that is breaking a Torah commandment. That is breaking a Jewish obligation to not cause unnecessary pain and suffering to animals. So I can't fulfill the custom, even if somebody wants to say, but it's a custom to eat meat on Shabbat or the holidays. Okay, so it's a custom, like you said, like this is what we do, this is how we celebrate, you know, but it can't be that I'm fulfilling a custom while I'm breaking a law. It just doesn't work that way in Judaism. But somehow, yeah, I feel like there is like this really kind of cloudy gray area that people, things, I don't want to say get mixed up, but it's sometimes maybe hard to delineate between the two. And in addition to that, Judaism is filled with lots and lots of laws, not just the 613 commandments, but each one of those commandments, breaks off into many, many additional details of laws and obligations on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly kind of cycle. And so one of the more classic responses that I hear from people is that we're allowed to eat meat. The Torah says we're allowed to eat animals. Nothing more to talk about. God let us eat animals, and who am I to argue? And I say you're absolutely right. I'm always very sure to say absolutely. Judaism permits the eating of animals. Absolutely true. But what Judaism doesn't allow is causing unnecessary pain and suffering to animals. And what's happening in the modern day factory farming world has never happened before in human history, the way that we treat animals today and on the scale that we do. This is unseen in human history, and that's why we never really saw such massive vegan and vegetarian movements before. It's a response to what we're doing to our fellow creatures on this planet. So again, yes, there is permission to eat animals in Judaism. There's not an obligation today to eat animals, but there is an obligation to be compassionate towards animals and to do what we can to make sure that we are not causing unnecessary pain and suffering to animals. In addition to that, there's another law in the Torah called Bal Tashchit, which means don't waste resources. Right? This is one of the foundational laws when talking about Judaism and the environment, about a Jewish environmental ethic, that we are supposed to be aware as much as we can. And I know in our modern day world, it is so hard to, because we live in such a wasteful society. Almost anything we do, everything that we do almost on a daily basis is creating waste. But still, even with that reality, especially because of that reality, we are obligated to do our very best in our own personal lives to reduce the waste, to reduce the use and specifically the waste of resources. And again, we know in the factory farming world, in the meat, dairy, and egg industries, the amount of resources that they are using unnecessarily is absurd and destructive to the world.
So when people listen to you and they think, and the name of my podcast and the work I do is To Veg Your Best, because I don't think most people are able to go 0 to 100 with the idea of completely opting out of animal products. So we want to just be challenging ourselves to do better, be kinder, show up in a way that we are, that we know is good, and to rethink where we are causing harm. So we want to do our best. We want to be on that line. But where do you think the pushback comes from when people are, for want of a better word, sort of insulted or triggered by talking about some of these concepts?
I think triggered is a very good word to use. For the most part, the conversations I have with people, even with those people who are challenging me, are nice and calm and respectful from both sides. But every now and then I get somebody who's really, I mean, really, really triggered by what I'm saying and accuses me. This happened a few months ago, actually. Accuses me of all kinds of horrible things, like making up a new religion. You're leading people astray. This isn't Judaism, and yet all I'm doing, literally every single time I write, I post on social media, or I talk, whether it's in a video or live in person, I'm literally only sharing Torah Jewish sources, one after the other. Sources that are mainstream, that go back hundreds of years and thousands of years. So nothing what I'm sharing to support this view is coming from a place that's not mainstream Jewish thought. But yeah, right, people are triggered. I think it's a combination of a few things. First, I think we have to be really honest. People are addicted to things. They might not realize that you can get addicted to certain kinds of foods, but we know, and there's scientific proof, specifically with dairy. I've read articles, right, that that people are obviously get addicted to certain ways of eating, and it's very, very hard. And I understand that, and my heart's really open to that. I get changing one's food choices, one's diet is not a simple thing. And like you said, I think it's really the best way is to encourage people to take those small steps. Some people are able to make bigger steps quickly, great. If not, small steps are also amazing. Cut out meat once a week, that's amazing. I grew up eating meat twice a day, every day, day after day. To cut out once a week, maybe twice a week, that's already really creating a positive impact. So I think people are triggered because their bodies are addicted to it, their brains are addicted to it. Two, it's cultural. It's what we do. It's how we celebrate. They don't know anything else. I met someone recently who said he said this to me. He said, Akiva, you're absolutely right. I agree with everything you're saying. Just tell me what to do. How do I eat in a vegan kind of way? Right. So I started sharing more recipes. Which he said was very, very helpful, like sharing recipes on my social media pages. So yeah, it's different. It's challenging to make any kind of change in our life, especially when it comes to food. And it's all these things. We're cutting through layers and layers of connection and attachment through food and habit, and that's never an easy thing to change or to break. And the last thing, and which I alluded to before, there are people specifically in the Orthodox Jewish community, which is my community, and I love them, and they're my people, and I have such great respect for them. But when it comes to this, they really believe that this is the way we do it. This is the way we do it. This is the way my parents did it. This is the way my teachers do it. My rabbis. I never heard a big rabbi say anything against this. Where are you coming from? And so it's just so supported and copied, so to speak, in the world around them, that they don't see anything wrong with it, because in my belief, at least, they're not thinking enough about what's happening way before the food gets to their plate. What's happening with the animals? How are they being raised? How are they being treated? The whole, from the moment that they're born, before, until they're slaughtered. How are they being treated, and is that in line with Jewish teachings, values, and laws? And if it's not, which it's not, but if they realize or start to think that Judaism as a tradition that is based so much on ethics and values and trying to make the world a better place, forces us, demands, requires of us, and expects of us that we're going to be open to making change to realign the way that we're living with our ancient laws and values.
Now, I have heard many people who visited Israel say, oh my gosh, I could easily be vegan if I lived in Tel Aviv. No, so what you're saying is a little bit that like everywhere, some things are easy, some things are hard in terms of veganism. But is there a divide along in Israel itself? Is there a divide among secular Jews and very observant Jews or ultra-Orthodox Jews about veganism? Would you say that what is it, 5% of Israeli citizens identify as being vegan?
Yeah, the latest numbers I've seen is about 5% of Israelis are vegan. If you include vegetarians, that goes up to around 12 or 13%, just from what I've seen. So it is per capita. It's a very high number. That's why we're the top three. The last I saw, we were in the top three. Sometimes we're number one. But Tel Aviv as a city, right, is they say the vegan capital of the world. I think you do see in the Jewish world that more non-Orthodox Jews have become vegan, are becoming vegan. It's more of a I don't know how do I say it. Basically, it's not as we say in Hebrew, and then I'll figure out the English. Lo mikubal so much in the Orthodox world to become vegan, not accepted, not the norm. It's taking longer in the Orthodox world, but you are starting to also see changes in that. I'm meeting more other vegan rabbis, which is really, really great, both in Israel and America. Not a ton of us, but we're out there, and we're talking about these things and sharing these teachings. But I think where we are right now as a collective Jewish people, it is more of a value in the non-Orthodox world. But I do have hope, and I really do have a strong belief that it will take off. it will increase in the Orthodox world, hopefully soon.
I think it's very hard in any culture to look at your family, your mother. I myself raised my children eating animal products. I mean, so I I don't think it's hard for me to imagine that there's an assumption, as Melanie Joy says in her book, that it's normal, natural, and necessary to eat animal products. And so when someone starts saying no, you have to say either I did it wrong or my mother did it wrong. And I like to say nobody did it wrong so much as they did what they thought was best. And maybe as we go through all of our lives, we know better, we do better. Big jumps, small jumps, but we want to I think we want that humility in terms of how we live. And in such a rapidly changing world where animals are not being brought to our plates and to our dinners in a traditional way at all, that it's incumbent upon us to really always think, to always see how we can do something. Now, when you have, as a rabbi, do you work with families? Is that part? Or do you have? I don't know the term. When we have like a parish type of thing in the Christian concept, do you have people that you work with daily, weekly?
So in the Jewish world, it's interesting. Most rabbis are not what we call pulpit rabbis, at least in the Orthodox world. Many are. Outside the Orthodox Jewish world, in the Reform and Conservative, if someone's a rabbi, they're usually a pulpit rabbi, meaning they're the rabbi of a congregation of a synagogue. In the Orthodox world, that's not the case. Most rabbis, and specifically most rabbis that I know, are not synagogue rabbis. They became rabbis because of their love for learning and their desire to teach. So most, if not all, non-pulpit rabbis in the Orthodox world are teachers, work in some way, shape, or form in education. That's what I do. I've been doing for over 20 years. So I don't work with families or individuals within a congregational setting, but in our new social media kind of world, I work with a lot of people through social media, and a lot of people reach out to me for questions and concerns. I do consulting also on various different topics related to Judaism, veganism, raising kids in schools, all these different issues that come up for people. So it's kind of like a virtual congregation, which is really fun, I have to say, for me, because it means I get to connect to all different kinds of people, all different backgrounds, from all different places. If I was an Orthodox rabbi in an Orthodox synagogue, so all of my congregants would be Orthodox, and all the people I worked with would be Orthodox for the most part. With what I'm doing on social media, it's amazing. I'm connecting to all kinds of people, from non-affiliated to Reform, conservative, Orthodox, atheist, and non-Jewish people as well. And it's been such a joy and such a pleasure. So I'm really having really interesting conversations and dialogues with all different kinds of people around these issues.
I think it's everybody needs to look at I know your Instagram site, but you probably have other platforms that you're active on. Are you on Facebook and Twitter and all of them?
I'm on Facebook and Instagram. So I started Vegan Rabbi on Facebook, and it was going really well. And somebody told me, one of my followers actually, like, you have Instagram. I'm like, no, I'm not on Instagram. I don't want to be on Instagram. I don't want another social media platform. One is enough. And this person's like, no, you have to. It's going to be really good for you and your work. So I'm like, okay. And I went onto Instagram and I saw it's a very interesting and different platform. So I keep both. For the most part, I post the same things, but every now and then it's a little different between Facebook and Instagram. But I basically have those two platforms. I've not added another one yet, possibly in the future. But yeah, so through those two virtual spaces is where I communicate mostly with people.
I find Instagram a friendlier spot than Facebook. On Facebook, I have to spend too much time blocking people.
Right.
I think maybe because it's just more active troll type of people. But you must get that too. You must get a fair amount of, let's just say, negative pushback on social media, or it can't just be me.
No, it's not just you. I've gotten my fair share. I've been doing this for so long, and I'm also from New York. I think being from New York has really helped me in a lot of different ways, and specifically with this, I have no patience for people who are going to be rude or going to be challenging just for the sake of challenging. I'm happy to have a conversation. People who troll and do all those other weird things online, I either just delete them and give them no airtime, or I don't engage with them at all. And people have sometimes even reach out to me and said, "How do you do that? How do you not get so upset and angry?" And just like I just decided a long time ago that I can't waste my time. I can't get into an argument with every single person who's trying to get into an argument with me. So I just let it go and I move on and really try to focus my time on more important things.
I think it's also something when people are new. I think when people are new with anything, but I hear from a lot of women who are new to veganism or vegetarianism, and they're like, how do I get all the facts and figures for the arguments? How do I make sure that I'm, ready for those, conversations with my uncle or my, neighbor, or my colleague? And personally, I say I wouldn't bother. I really wouldn't bother. I think you're perfectly within your rights to just say, works for me. It's what I want. And, but I love when people have access to someone like yourself who is answering people's questions using facts and figures. You do have a background in environmental science. You are up to speed. It's very nice for us to be able to, who choose not to engage anyone, regardless, to turn to someone and listen to how you respectfully argue in the nice way, argue in terms
Right.
of having an intellectual argument.
Right. 100%. And again, I'm always open to, as you said, a respectful conversation, even if it gets a little heated and we're disagreeing with each other, that's fine. I mean, Jews love to argue and Jews love to disagree. It's, really part of our tradition, to really challenge each other. And so as long as, people keep it within a respectful environment, I'm always happy. And I do. And I have been I started Vegan Rabbi on Facebook 2.5 years ago, or I think even more. And I've been loving the dialogue. And most of the communication really does come in the form of wanting to know more and questions and clarifications and how do I respond to this, or what do you say about that, or challenges that they're going through in their own process of taking on a vegan lifestyle. But every now and then, of course, there are those people who are just out there to challenge me and say that I'm wrong. And again, if it's within a respectful context, I'm always happy to engage with them. It's not the first time that I've been challenged. So most, if not all, literally, seriously. I mean, I can't remember the last time I heard a new challenge to what I'm sharing. So, I'm ready. I have my answers. I've said it before, and I'm happy to say it again. I'm happy to say it 1,000,000,000 more times. But there's very little, again, if anything, new that I'm finding that people are coming to me in terms of challenges. Even recently, on my recent speaking tour in the US, I was talking to it was a mixed kind of Jewish crowd, but there was an Orthodox Jew there who was very, very sweet and very, very respectful. He didn't, I think also, you never really heard this before, Judaism and veganism, what are you talking about? And he had a couple of questions. And, with all due respect, they were not that challenging or not that complicated. It wasn't so hard to, he wasn't trying to be mean. He just wanted to understand. And the challenges that he brought, to me from a Jewish perspective were very easy to answer. There's no real, I don't think there's a really strong Jewish argument for eating animals today at all. And that's even without considering what's happening in the factory farming world. But the second you do bring in what's happening in the factory farming world, I mean, it becomes, for me, really, really clear, that we just can't be supporting that. With our laws and our values of animal welfare and environmental stewardship, we can't be supporting such disastrous and destructive industries.
Where do you think, for the people who reach out to you and want to pick your brain or get some advice from you, what are the classic problems that people present to you? Where do they say, Rabbi, I just don't know how this is going to work?
That's a really good question. So there's a few different things. One, if we're talking a lot about the Orthodox community, which I think is good, if they live in the Orthodox community, so just that whole situation of being the only vegan in a friend circle or in their family or in their community even, and going to Shabbat meals and holiday meals. I mean, there's so much, observance around food, involving food. So really, changing one's food choices and being in that same family, friend circle, community could be really challenging. And then having to deal with all the challenges that people bring up about that. And right, it's not for everybody. For me, again, maybe it's the New Yorker in me. I'm happy to have an argument with you, but that's not everyone's thing, and not everyone wants that. Not everyone wants the attention or to have to always explain him or herself. And I can understand how that could be really challenging. So there's that. Number two is just how, what do I do? For people who've been vegan a very long time, it's not, we don't think about it anymore. But for someone who's newly vegan, that's a really big change. So, just eating in general, how do I, and the health aspect, they don't want to get, sick. They don't want to harm their body. They want to make sure they're getting everything that they need, which I totally understand. So there's that aspect of it. There's the holidays again. How do I have a Shabbat? I want to invite friends over, for Shabbat. How do I make a vegan meal that's going to be, we have this concept in Judaism called Lichvot Shabbat, that the meals that we make on Shabbat should be in honor of Shabbat. They should be like the best meals of the week, like really, really just like full on meals and multiple courses and like, the best food you're preparing all week. How do I do that for guests who are not vegan? So lots of questions, lots of sensitivities, worries, especially at the beginning, can come up with people, both again on the individual, the family level. I've heard from lots of people in terms of family, and then again the community. And one thing which again I think I alluded to a few times, but I just want to say really, really clear. I think one thing specifically in the Orthodox world, and definitely in the ultra-Orthodox world, is like, if my rabbi doesn't do this, I'm not doing this. Right? It's really, there's this real rabbinic leadership, which I respect greatly. I've learned over the years with incredible rabbis who I have tremendous respect for, and really, when you meet someone who's really just an example of the kind of person you want to be, the kind of Jew you want to be, you want to follow in their ways. And if that person is eating meat on Shabbat, and if that person is eating, meat sandwich on a Tuesday afternoon, then that's what I'm going to do too. There's no problem with it. And can't, I'm not going to listen to you. Like I'm not going to give you any even space to tell me that this is wrong because my rabbi does it. And if my rabbi does it, then it's not wrong.
I think that's, I think that's, we have, what do we say, that what wires together fires together. So we have this sense of, I have leadership from family or from spiritual leadership, and I have my idea of ethics, and I have what I feel I'm hearing from my teachings, from the law, from my religion, and how can it be wrong? How can I be an observant Jew if I'm calling someone who is my teacher wrong on an issue? So maybe we never have to say wrong. Is it possible that we don't say wrong? Or do you feel that wrong is involved? Because I know in the vegan community, some people, I do believe there are moral rights and wrongs. And I don't always think those are the things that are the most helpful when people are trying to change behaviors, because they become very fraught and they bring up a lot of resistance, like deep resistance and confusion. So I'm wondering if you see that same problem when we go straight to it's wrong or they're wrong or the behavior being wrong.
Right. So I seldom, if ever, use the word wrong. You're wrong, they're wrong, what I think, and I think it's like you said before, it's a process. People have to open their eyes to this. They have to become more aware of this, for whatever reason. And I really don't know why, but when I was 18 years old, even 17, I started becoming really hyper aware. Why? But I can't explain that. But once I became aware, I couldn't not change my actions. So I think that's a real kind of important part of this is are people aware of what's really going on? And we're living in an age where, I mean, just the amount of information that we have out there about everything, in general, but specifically about this issue is so great. There's so much information. There's websites, there's videos, there's short videos, there's documentaries. I mean, how many times have I heard people say, "Yeah, I watched one documentary and I went vegan." I've heard that from so many people, whether it's for health reasons, for animal reasons, for environmental reasons, so I think it's a process. People have to know, you have to become aware. And as I like to say, even if people know, even see the documentary, because not everyone goes vegan right after they see one of these very well done documentaries. And that's because, excuse me, the journey from the head to the heart is very, very long sometimes. And so, to take that information, in an intellectual way, but to bring it down to your heart on an emotional level and then allow it to, express itself in change in lifestyle, that's a whole journey that someone has to go through. I went through that journey many, many years ago. I don't know. I don't know. Not everyone is in that same space of taking in that information and wanting it to get to their heart level and wanting to be open to change for whatever reason. And I'll just say maybe one other thing. When it comes to, like, how can I do this? My rabbi doesn't do it. And nobody in my community does it, right? So kind of like that just is like a self-perpetuating reality. Like, I mean, the world has changed. We have to be aware of that. And I remember hearing a story. There's a very, very big rabbi, the Lubavitcher Rabbi, originally from Europe. He moved to Brooklyn, and in the 1950s, I think it was, he would smoke cigarettes. I don't know how many cigarettes he smoked, but he would smoke cigarettes, like everyone basically back then. Doctors, we know, were prescribing cigarettes to people, or at least approving of smoking cigarettes. And there's a story that's told of this, and he was like a Rebbe. He was like a grand rabbi. He was the rabbinic spiritual leader of thousands and thousands of people who watched it every single move in this kind of way that we spoke about already before. And someone came into his office one day as he was smoking a cigarette, and the person brought a newspaper to this rabbi, and it was the first time that it was being reported that cigarettes might be harmful to our health, right? And so the story goes that upon hearing that, even just a small doubt that smoking cigarettes might be harmful to our health, the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, put out the cigarette immediately upon hearing that and never touched another cigarette again, right? And that, I feel, is a we need to have to what's happening in the factory farming world today. That we thought, and we had good reason to think that, today animals are being raised in the kind and compassionate ways that they're not. All right, they're being held in these prisons, and they're being tortured, and they're being treated with such cruelty, and they're subject to so much pain and suffering. It's changed. It's radically changed, and as a result, we need to radically change our behaviors, right? And I'll just say this also, that then opens up the door for us to return to what was the original, and some say the ideal diet as given forth in the Torah, right? In the first chapter of Genesis, after God creates the first human being, the first diet given to the first human being was a completely plant-based diet, Genesis 1:29. That was the first diet, right? And many Torah commentators have said over the centuries that was the ideal diet, and the only reason that diet changed to include the eating of animals as a permissible act, after the flood in the generation of Noah, was because humanity became morally and spiritually degraded, and therefore didn't have the capability, and God didn't think they had the ability to hold to that original ideal level and way of living. So I feel like, what's happening in the world today is kind of you know, again, with all this horrible cruelty and pain and suffering that animals are going through in the factory farming world, it's forcing us, or at least I believe should be forcing us, to look again at how we're eating and then rediscover, so to speak, although it's been there this whole time, rediscover the fact that in Judaism there is this real strong support for a plant-based diet as not only the original diet, but the ideal way of eating, and also even, and there are sources that support this, also the way that we, all of humanity, will return to in the future as well.
So, Rabbi, how do my listeners learn more about the work you do? I understand you're working a little bit now with this Netflix special in terms of matchmaking. And I think this is probably, from a day-to-day point of view, this is where so many people have their challenge, right, is to find a spouse who is at least on board with their veganism, and how will their family be raised in a vegan way, or not. I am used to topics of conversion in terms of mixed marriages, but there's also the mixed marriage of vegan, non-vegan, right?
100%. Yeah. So I'll just say quickly, yeah, no, it's really interesting and exciting what's happening with that as well. And right, we're talking about challenges that people express. And one of the things I didn't say before, and I'll say now, is that over time, more and more people who follow me on social media were getting in touch with me and continue to get in touch with me. Like, Rabbi, I'm vegan, I'm dating. It's not easy. It's not simple dating as a vegan in the Jewish world. It's hard enough. It's looking for my soulmate, for my life partner. And as a vegan, it's making it even harder. Can you help me? Do you know anybody? And this already, about a year ago, people started getting in touch with me with that request, with that question. And I'm like, dating? What do I know about dating? I mean, I've been dated in years. I never worked in the dating world, but as I kept hearing it from more and more people, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. There's like a real problem here. There's a real challenge here. I'm sure somebody's doing something about it. And I scanned the internet, found nobody specifically working with Jewish vegan and vegetarian singles. And I said to myself, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try my best. And I jumped right in, like with no training. I had no context for this. This was not work I've ever done before. But I jumped in, and because I wanted to try my best to help these people and to see if I could find people for them, make any matches. And I eventually started using a website that a friend of mine built for singles, and he built me my own private community for Jewish vegan and vegetarian singles, and that's still a website I'm using. It's kind of like a do-it-yourself, like free sign-up kind of website that people can use. They can find out information on this on my website, which is akivagersh.com. They can also get in touch with me through my social media pages, Vegan Rabbi on Facebook or Instagram. But basically, as time went on and I was doing this more and more, my database grew and grew, and I realized that people also want coaching, and people want help in terms of just going through the dating process and learning how to do that better. So I started getting involved with dating coaching for vegans and vegetarians, and of course the matchmaking. And then one day, I'm talking to a woman who lives on the street for me, who I knew worked in the dating world as a dating coach and matchmaker, and I told her, Elisa, I'm jumping into this world. People from my network are asking me for this, and I jumped into this whole world, and now I'm working with Jewish vegan and vegetarian singles, trying to help them find their life partner. And she was really amazed by this niche. And basically, long story short, she's like, we should do something together. And of course, this Elisa is Elisa Ben Shalom, and she's the star of the new Netflix show Jewish Matchmaking. And it's so exciting, and I'm so happy for her, and just what's happening with her personally and professionally, and what she's doing. Who she is on the show is just so incredible. I feel like she's just really shining such a beautiful and powerful Jewish light into the world, and really sharing this ancient wisdom of Jewish dating and matchmaking with the world. And now I'm basically working on her team as a dating coach, which is something I never thought I would be doing, 10, 11, 12 months ago. And it's now part of the vegan rabbi kind of world and work that I do, and it's really, really exciting. It's incredibly inspiring work. It's very challenging work, but there's a certain kind of, you know, excitement that I have for this that is really propelling me forward, and I'm really excited to continue in this specific niche of trying to help Jewish vegan and vegetarian singles find their life partner.
Well, I think it's so fun because one of the blessings of this job is I get to talk to people who have transmuted their activism in so many different ways. Sometimes it's in a business, sometimes it's in coaching, sometimes it's in food production or training people. But this is the first one. This is the first person I've spoken to. Your activism is not just in your spiritual teaching, but also in like helping people make their actual choices about beginning their families in a way that will be conducive to staying vegan or vegetarian. And I think when we have that little tipping point of people who think it's normal and reasonable to be vegan, things will really change quickly. I think as long as it's kind of that tiny little percentage, it can be discounted but when there's one in every family.
Right, 100%. And it's really starting to happen, you know? I mean, people will come up to me like, oh yeah, my kid is vegan, or like my uncle's vegan, or somebody in my family's vegan. And it really, we are seeing change now. And it's amazing. When I first went vegan in 1995, I couldn't have imagined, what health food stores would look like in terms of all their vegan products. Just in America, America is always like, light years ahead of Israel in terms of these the diversity of these kinds of products. And all the restaurants and the cuisine and the level. I mean, back in the day, it's like you were vegan. I mean, you ate like brown rice, lentils, and tofu all the time. And today to see what's happening is really, really incredible. And you're right. And I love that you said that in terms of helping people find their life partner. That means they get to create an entire life now. It's not just them on their own, like, oh, what am I going to eat? How am I going to eat? It's they get to do it with somebody else. They have a partner in this. That creates such a strength and a confidence and a even stronger conviction. And then they get to raise their kids like that. And they get to invite people over to their Shabbat meals and their holiday meals and their family, events and gatherings. And it becomes a whole nother level of what they're doing as a single, as an individual. And yeah, I really love that aspect of it, is that it really really gets to expand their value and their belief in this in a whole new way.
I think I'm going to respect your time because it's evening in Israel, and you probably have things to do with your family. But I would like to thank you so much for making time to being here on Veg Your Best. And I think that you also are going to, for people who are not Jewish or who do not come from a very defined spiritual tradition or religion, they're going to find in you, I think, an opening for how do I be someone who's got a different point of view in a culture that is dominated by not paying attention to animal products, not worrying about it too much right now. So I think everybody will get something from this interview. And I personally, you're an extremely engaging, great communicator. And I hope everyone goes straight over to Vegan Rabbi and Instagram and enjoys what you've been creating the way I have. Thank you, Akiva.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Really, really such an honor and a pleasure to be on your podcast and to talk with you and to discuss these ideas. Really, really, thank you so much.
So what did you think of Rabbi Akiva Gersh, the vegan rabbi? So many of us come from family traditions, cultural norms, countries, religious practices of all sorts. And of course, we do not want to abandon what we value about those activities, those meals, those opportunities when we felt connection and closeness, and where we celebrated joys or came together for solace in fellowship. We want that sense of community very often that we were raised in, community and continuity, but many of us have found many of us have found our decisions to limit or eliminate the consumption of animal products to be somewhat isolating or disconnecting. And I am so very grateful that Akiva has shared his really very personal, beautiful, and inspiring journey here on the pod this week. And I am wondering how all of us can put a little bit of this into practice in our own lives, right where we find ourselves in our communities, in our families and traditions this summer. You know me, I'm always reminding myself by reminding you guys that we can actually decide to make challenging situations a blessing. We can actually decide to make challenging circumstances an opportunity or a magnificent quest. We really can. When we decide to reframe the challenges that face us as opportunities, we get to grow, we get to serve. I hope you're going to follow Rabbi Akiva Gersh or share him with people that you know who could use his special brand of communication and wisdom. And also, you'll follow him, the Vegan Rabbi, on Instagram, and his website, akivagersh.com. akivagersh.com. So many articles, videos, all the ways you can learn more about his work. Okay, my veggie besties? I will talk to you next week. June, can you believe it? And until then, get out there and veg your best. Veg Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Veg Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.